I want to talk about the South China Sea stuff in a moment, but I mean, Colin, Harbin, a city of 10.3 million people in China, apparently in lockdown tonight. Talk about PR from the PRC, the People's Republic of China. They're saying that the virus was brought in from America. I mean, they are gearing their people up psychologically to not be trusting of the rest of the world. And I'm sure that comments like this will be, you know, part of the matrix that they're trying to put to people, that somehow or other everyone's against us. I think they are building up to something.
I think they've been building since Mao days. You know, China's been planning basically war ever since those days. I mean, they, you know, wherever they go, they try and take over. There's people in the west of China that are living in what we hear as concentration camps. They're, you know, they've taken over Tibet and Mongolia. They're in the Spratly Islands. They're, you know, they're threatening people in the South China Seas. They've been threatening Japan forever. Look, they've had a plan for a long, long time, world dominance, and they do that through the UN. I think the biggest group of people that have helped China become more powerful and more, you know, communistic and socialistic in their ways is the UN through the WHO. And, you know, if the WHO were as good as Roger Daltrey and the Singers, well, maybe we could say something good about them, but this is a cover-up. This coronavirus has been a giant cover-up. And, you know, the communists, we're not having a go at the communists, you know, the people that live in these countries. We're talking about the government. And people like to say, oh, you're racist if you say anything bad about the Chinese. We're not talking about the Chinese people. Get that in your head. We're talking about a communist government that doesn't care about people. And the people of China would love to see their government change and become more democratic like the Western countries are.
It's very important to remember.
Well, I think they've got a taste for it. They've got a taste for it. They've got a taste for it, though. I mean, James McGrath, I mean, China on a war footing is a serious statement to make, but there is certainly an economic war that they have been waging for a long, long time, and they've been winning. They have, like mistletoe wraps itself around a big oak tree. They have sucked this country completely dry. They've got all of our gear. They've got coal stored underneath the water in some of the ports. They've got so much coal. They've got iron ore from Western Australia. They've got bauxite. They've got all the bits they need if they want to take us on. They don't need any more of our stuff. They've got it all already.
Well, you know what was the most, I think, disgraceful thing that happened in the last week or so is that Vanuatu was bashed by a cyclone, and we sent over a plane with aid, and there was a Chinese plane on the tarmac. It's a single runway airport, which refused to move. So our plane, our ADF plane, Air Force plane, could not land and deliver aid because of this Chinese plane who was playing games. And to me, that was such symbolism in terms of China's activities in the South Pacific, but also we were talked about, you know, I was raving about Ethiopia before. I backpacked through Ethiopia back in 2007. I was going around, you know, when I had slightly longer hair and less weight, and there were Chinese projects being done there, because you talk to the locals, and what it was the Chinese Communist government were lending money to the Ethiopian government to pay for these projects, so they became effectively a client state of Communist China, but the people doing all the work were Chinese citizens who were flown over to do the work. China's is building up its influence around the world, whether it's doing economic work and building infrastructure in places like Ethiopia, or what it's doing with the work in the South Pacific. And that is the biggest concern to me, is the South Pacific, and especially Papua New Guinea, the influence of China, of Communist China, and Communist Chinese money in those countries.
Well, that's exactly right,
well,
James.
The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. That's the point, Bronwyn.
Yeah,
We've got to be vigilant.
There's a very interesting article published in the Navy League's Journal about 12 months ago, drawing a parallel between Imperial Japan pre-war, of course, and it's planning for a co-prosperity zone. And what tactics that China is using, the Communist Chinese are using, in the Pacific. And it's a very interesting read indeed. And those examples that you've given, James, of particularly of Vanuatu, I mean, that's on our doorstep. These are areas in the Pacific that, you know, my dad and his generation, and we're sort of commemorating Anzac Day tomorrow, that they fought to keep. I mean, my dad fought up in the islands to keep Australia safe, and we just seem to think that it's all benign. We have to get out of this torpor that we seem to have got into and really acknowledge what has to be done. And it's not going to be easy, but we first have to disaggregate ourselves from a dependence on China for production and the goods that come out of there where it is slave labour. We're going to have policies that enable us to start to think nationally and have self-sufficiency. And it's not going to be easy, and they'll probably cost more. But in order to offset the higher wages that we pay, we have the ability to give cheap electricity. So we've got to stop importing all those wind turbines out of China and using the subsidy that we give them to bring them here, and start using our own resources which can produce cheap electricity for all of us and give those businesses the opportunity to compete.